How do we go from this quirky, sketchy illustration of a samurai to something like Your Name, an animation marvel so stunningly beautiful it hurts my eyes? It might be hard to believe, but the history of manga goes back a lot further than just Astro Boy. We kind of think of the 50s and 60s as being the time that Japanese comics really exploded in popularity, but the term manga can actually be traced back all the way to 1798. That's right, manga is technically older than the telephone and the typewriter. And if we want to be really specific, you could even argue that sequential art has technically existed in Japan as far back as the 13th century. But let's actually fast forward to when it was actually called manga, because the first piece of art ever to be called manga was a collection of illustrations depicting daily life called Shiji no Yukikai, drawn by the artist Sando Kyoden during the Edo period in the late 1700s. And the term manga itself can be translated to something like whimsical pictures. Now this term picked up a little bit more steam in the 1800s with the Hokusai manga, a collection of sketches by the Japanese block printing artist Hokusai. And just for the record, this guy is like a major deal in art history. Even if you don't know these sketches, I promise that you have seen some of his work because he's the one who did the world famous Great Wave. So basically the same guy who did one of the most famous pieces of art ever also kind of invented manga. An absolute legend for real. However, it wouldn't really start to look like the comics that we recognize today until 1902. That was with the work of Kitazawa Rakuten, a professional cartoonist who drew Jiji manga. Now, unsurprisingly, Rakuten's art took a cue from Western cartoons and comic strips and were included with the Jiji Shimpo newspaper. However, this comic strip style would soon change in favor of long-form storytelling. After World War II, manga truly became a cultural force that would grow into a global phenomenon. In 1946, Sazae-san began a comedy series following the life of a suburban Japanese family. It's kind of like the post-World War II Japanese Simpsons, but 50 years older. If you thought a story like One Piece was too long, well, I've got some news for you because Sazae-san is still running to this day. Now, its anime version began a couple of decades later, in 1969, and as of today, it has aired over, and get this, 2,600 episodes and is the longest running animated series in the entire world. So if you want to assert dominance over a One Piece fan who won't stop begging you to read it, aka me, well then you just go ahead and flex on them by picking up Sazae-san. And no disrespect to Sazae-san, but our story really only begins in 1951 when the artist Osamu Tezuka premiered what is likely the most influential series I'm gonna talk about today, Astro Boy. Because you really can't even talk about Japanese comics without at least mentioning it. Its author, Osamu Tezuka, has been called the Walt Disney of Japan, the father of manga, or even the god of manga, which honestly has a quite nice ring to it, I think. Tezuka had already released popular series such as New Treasure Island in books called Akihon, or Red Books. Basically cheaply printed hardbound volumes that became extremely popular during World War I for their cheapness. But then in 1951, he debuted a character that would go down in history, Mighty Atom, or as he's called in the West, Astro Boy. And again, Astro Boy's influence on modern manga and anime culture cannot be overstated. Tezuka was deeply impacted by the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki at the end of the war. In a time when Japan was still healing from the devastation of the war, this optimistic hero used atomic powers for good. Astro Boy gave the world a superhero who was a young boy instead of an adult, influencing many future shonen heroes. Most importantly, Atom was super relatable to young viewers who followed the adventures of the robotic hero. I'm still not really sure why they were able to build Astro Boy rocket thrusters but then weren't able to give the poor kid a shirt though. In the 1960s, Astro Boy made its televised debut as well, airing both in Japan and even in the United States. And the show was instantly a worldwide success, becoming the first animated series from Japan with real international appeal. During that very same time, other series also became popular in both Japan and in the West, such as Speed Racer, or as it was known in Japan, Mac Go Go Go. Wow, that is a lot of goes, but these were just a small taste of the anime explosion that would happen in just a few decades. In the meantime, while shonen, which is geared towards younger, male viewers mostly, was gaining more and more popularity, manga was taking a darker and more serious turn instead. Many authors who had grown up with Astro Boy and some other comics for younger audiences began writing content with a lot more adult themes in the forms of seinen, aimed at older male audiences, and gekiga, manga made specifically for adults. No, not that type of manga made specifically for adults. Two great examples of seinen and geika are actually 1964's Kamui, about a rogue ninja in feudal Japan, and 1970's Lone Wolf and Club, about an assassin bent on revenge. 1972's Devilman was an even darker story with a long-lasting legacy, with it receiving even darker and more violent remakes in both the 90s and even in 2018, with Devilman Crybaby, which sets a record of obliterating your mental health in only 10 short episodes. Now, these stories and others like them, with their mature themes and more dramatic violence, pushed the medium in entirely new directions, showing that comics weren't just for children, they could be used to tell all kinds of stories. Nonetheless though, including stories for little kids as well. Kodomo-muke is literally manga geared towards very young audiences, and 1969's Doraemon is a perfect example of an adorable children's character that is still very popular here in Japan today. And since Doraemon is just everywhere whenever I leave the house here in Japan, this robotic, earless cat having a magic pocket in his belly lives rent-free in my head. Moving a bit forward in time again, as the 70s began, it was time for a new superstar. Shotaro Ishinomori actually worked on Astro Boy under Osamu Tezuka before starting work on his own material. And then later on, he actually started several long-running series on his own that would have a huge impact on the medium of manga and anime. Cyborg 009, Kamen Rider, and the one that will certainly be the most familiar to Western audiences, Super Sentai, a story about a colorful team of superheroes that would later serve as the basics for the Power Rangers. And actually, the complicated story of how this would become the Power Rangers is a topic kind of crazy enough for its very own video. Now, Ishimori's stories began in print but would eventually become massive hits in live action as well. Meanwhile, also in the 70s, manga authorship was becoming more and more diverse. While shoujo manga aimed at young female audiences had existed just about as long as the Japanese comic industry itself had, until this point they had been written mostly by men for most of the industry's history. Series like From Eroica with Love by Yasuko Aoike, The Poi Clan by Moto Hagio, and The Rose of Versailles by Ryoko Ikeda revolutionized shoujo by focusing on emotionally mature, psychologically complex stories. A major departure from the romantic comedies that had dominated shoujo in the early 50s. They now started treading new ground by deeply exploring shifting political perspectives of gender and sexuality, creating the bai-shonen character archetype and the boys love genre as well. In 1979, the next big thing would then pop off as well. And when I say big, I mean literally. Robots had long been a staple, especially since Astro Boy was pretty much the mascot of the medium at this point. But then, the world was introduced to Mobile Suit Gundam, and the mecha genre of anime got absolutely huge. Okay, that one's figuratively. And these stories addressed a really important psychological need in viewers everywhere. After all, in Maslow's hierarchy of needs, there's food and shelter, but even more crucial to our survival is the need to see giant robots punch each other. Truly where would we be without Gundam? There were some precursors though. Gundam was far from the first series to ever introduce giant robots that were piloted from within. I mean, the Super Sentai also piloted a giant mech suit. Other early mechs included Tetsujin 28 Go, known as Gigantor in the US, and Mazinger Z, which was the first giant robot that also had a human pilot. Gundam, however, launched a massive franchise that remains popular to this very day with a ton of iteration throughout the decades. It had a different take on storytelling, focusing more on the humans inside than just the giant robot action. Its depiction of the realistic effects of war made it an enduring series that basically became interchangeable with the mecha genre itself. Gundam then would lead to an offshoot of even more mechs. One that actually saw a lot of success in the US was 1984's Robotech, which has got to be one of the strangest shows in all of history. You see, Robotech was never really a thing in Japan. It was actually a Frankenstein's monster of 3 different anime spliced together: Macross, Super Dimension Cavalry Southern Cross, and Genesis Climber Mospeada. And okay, I'm kind of starting to see why those titles might not have super caught on with an American audience. These 3 were originally 3 distinct series of their own, but they were then all edited together and redubbed to make an entirely new show out of all 3 of them. But somehow all the American children just ate it all up along with their bowls of Cap'n Crunch, having absolutely zero clue that they were actually watching a really unholy merged combination of 3 separate mech cartoons at once. But of course, mecha wasn't the only popular genre. I mean, this was the 1980s. Action heroes like Arnold Schwarzenegger, Jean-Claude Van Damme, and Dolph Lundgren were in all the movie theaters, and those muscle-bound manly men weren't just restricted to live action. Series like 1984's Fist of the North Star featured a hyper-masculine post-apocalyptic adventure filled with violence and a lot of gore. This classic also gave us one of anime's greatest and most long-lasting memes. And of course, I can't talk about the manliest of men without talking about Guts from the absolute classic Berserk, which basically combined all of the darkness of the 17th seinen with all of the raw masculinity and violence of the 80s, creating one of the most brutal and also badass series of all time. To this day, Berserk has basically achieved legend status, with practically every single panel somehow containing more details than most entire manga. Rest in peace to the legend Kento Miura. Also featuring characters who look more like a He-Man action figure than a real human being was JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. In 1987, JoJo's began, starting off a legacy that would last until, well, now. It is still ongoing to this day, and by page count alone, this thing is even longer than One Piece, since its chapters are significantly longer than the average Shonen Jump chapter is. Stylistically, JoJo, especially in its first 3 parts, utilized those same very masculine heroes. I mean, those guys here have shoulders for days, and they definitely did not skip leg day ever. However, Araki, JoJo's author, also infused his characters with plenty of feminine energy as well, by giving them colorful, glamorous outfits and contorting their bodies into poses that would honestly instantly shatter every bone in a regular human's body. But the 80s also gave us the biggest shonen phenomenon since Astro Boy, one whose global impact would catapult manga and anime's popularity into the absolute stratosphere: Dragon Ball. Its author, Akira Toriyama, was already pretty well known in Japan for his popular series Dr. Slump, but Dragon Ball spread beyond just Japan's borders and took the entire world by storm. I probably don't really have to explain this to you, but Dragon Ball followed the adventures of Goku on his quest to find the mythical wish-granting Dragon Balls. The story kind of started out as a zany comedy adventure story before eventually growing up into the battle shonen that we know and love today. I mean, seriously, it's mind-blowing having grown up on Dragon Ball Z's insane fights and transformations and then going back to watch the original Dragon Ball, only to find out that the first wish they ever made was Oolong the pig wishing for a pair of panties. Oh, how the times have changed. Or maybe I should have just caught on sooner that Bulma's whole family is named after underwear and I was just not very smart as a kid, I guess. Though while Dragon Ball's popularity was soaring in Japan, it would still be another decade before Dragon Ball's anime would also air in the West. But in the meantime, another ticking time bomb that would lead to manga's world domination was counting down as well. In 1985, industry veteran Hayao Miyazaki and his partners founded Studio Ghibli. Now, Miyazaki had already worked in the animation industry for a very long time at this point, having directed his debut animated feature film, The Castle of Cagliostro, a Lupin III film, after having previously served as an animator on various television series as well. If you're a kid of the 80s or 90s, you probably have grown up with the series Heidi as well. Now, Studio Ghibli's first film is widely considered to be Nausicaa, Valley of the Wind, despite it coming out before the official founding of the studio. It was then followed by Castle in the Sky and Grave of the Fireflies, all of which were released to huge critical acclaim. Ghibli's beautiful and whimsical art style, its incredible storytelling, and strong, at times really dark messaging about war, nature, and youth turned its films into instant classics, with its output only improving over time. Just like with Akira Toriyama, it was really only a matter of time before Hayao Miyazaki was a household name even in the West. I mean, really, I could just list every single Studio Ghibli movie and just nod at the camera in satisfaction, and that could be basically the rest of this video. But that also seems like a topic for yet another time, so let me know if you want to see a Ghibli deep dive on this channel as well. Don't threaten me with a good time. Anyways, while Ghibli was starting to absolutely dominate the box office and Goku was riding the flying Nimbus across the pages of Shonen Jump, there also rose a hero more powerful than any other. Even American heroes like Superman didn't even stand a chance, and even after Goku went through his Super Saiyan transformations, there was no way he could ever contend with the might of this new character. From the mind of Naoko Takeuchi sprang forth the pretty guardian Sailor Moon in 1991. By combining aspects of the magical girl genre and the idea of a group of colorful heroes from Super Sentai, Sailor Moon was born and quickly became one of the most popular shoujo manga. Sailor Moon gave girls the world over a heroine that they could relate to, one that was just as strong, brave, and heroic as any other male superhero. However, these were more realistic characters, and their superpowered exploits were balanced with juggling their regular school lives as well. Also, a quick side note, Sailor Jupiter, best Sailor Scout, I will not elaborate on this one. Now, both Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball were some of the first anime series to really hit it big in the West as well. And really, it was animation that caught on across the world before the print version of manga ever did. Most bookstores in America just didn't carry manga at all yet at this point. Some larger ones might have had very small selections, and some kids may even have been lucky enough to get a Shonen Jump subscription. But before most of the world were buying Japanese comics, they were having Sailor Moon and Dragon Ball beamed directly into their television sets. In 1993, Spain and France would become the very first countries outside of Japan to air Sailor Moon, and in 1995, Sailor Moon's anime would then air in Canada and the US as well, meaning that Sailor Moon and the rest of the Sailor Scouts were now officially a global phenomenon. And just a year later, in 1996, Dragon Ball would then air in Latin America in its original form, while the US skipped over the first seasons and started off Goku's adventure as an adult with Dragon Ball Z. Luckily though, hordes of American children didn't seem to care that much at all about the completely unexplained characters, and instead were just mesmerized by astounding alien action. But soon that wouldn't be all that mesmerized American children. In fact, children from all over the world would soon have their eyes glued to the tiny screens of their Game Boy Colors as Pokemon now burst onto the scene. Combining the power of video games with a trading card game, a manga, and a hit anime TV show, Pokemania truly swept the globe in 1998. Pokemon would then go on to become the absolute sales behemoth that it has become today, spawning the single most profitable successful media franchise in history. Others would also try to capture the same lightning in a bottle that Pokemon did, with Digimon growing from a virtual pet toy into a similar multimedia franchise, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Shifting format from a dark series about a bully punishing game master into an advertisement for a children's card game. At this point, between Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon, and Pokemon, anime was no longer considered a niche foreign import into the West. They were hugely popular and easily rivaled American cartoons at this time already. Major networks started airing them in their kids programming, and in 1997, the Cartoon Network would even create a dedicated programming block called Toonami, focused on airing anime. However, it wasn't all kid stuff either. In Japan, seinen and gekiga had long been delivering series that were intended for a much more adult audience. But now, the West would finally also get a taste of some content intended more for adults. In 1994, Naoki Urasawa began publishing Monster, which followed a doctor hunting down a serial killer who, despite not having supernatural powers like so many other anime villains, remains to this day one of the most terrifying antagonists in all of fiction. 10 years later, Urasawa would then get the opportunity to retell one of the stories that first inspired him to become a mangaka, with Pluto, a darker and more realistic telling of a classic Astro Boy arc, which has since received its very own short Netflix adaptation. Hideki Anno's brilliant series Neon Genesis Evangelion was then released in 1995. People were already familiar with mecha anime like Gundam, and if you only saw the first few episodes of Evangelion, you might be forgiven for thinking that this was just another show about piloting giant robots. Small hint, it's not. In reality, Evangelion is a deconstruction of its own genre. It's a psychological thriller that deeply explores the mental states of its own characters. It's dark, it's gruesome, it will ruin your life, and you should totally watch it, by the way. And Evangelion's production studio Gainax would go on to make other well-regarded shows that are subversions of their own popular genres, such as FLCL and Gurren Lagann. In fact, some of its former employees would later go on to eventually found Studio Trigger, which would create equally wild content like, for example, Kill la Kill. While some viewers would bounce off of Neon Genesis Evangelion either because they didn't stick it out long enough to see what the show was actually about, or they did stick it out and then were terribly traumatized, there would soon come an anime that everyone could agree was certifiably, undeniably cool: Cowboy Bebop. Debuting in 1998 in Japan and releasing in 2001 in the US, yes, we finally made it into the 2000s, this slick space western combined the best aspects of westerns, crime thrillers, martial arts action movies, and much more, all to a killer jazz soundtrack. It has been hailed as one of the greatest series as a whole and is a popular gateway into anime for many new fans in general. These shows, along with some examples like Trigun and feature films like Akira, Ghost in the Shell, and Perfect Blue, proved to skeptical audiences that not only was there anime out there for everyone, adults and kids alike, it was also to be taken seriously as an art form as well, pushing the limits of animation and visual art with distinctive filmmakers like Studio Ghibli's Hayao Miyazaki and Perfect Blue's Satoshi Kon. Now, by this time, Dragon Ball was already a massive cultural force in the West and would only continue to grow in popularity. There was only one problem. Unbeknownst to the children watching the adventures of Goku and Vegeta on TV, Dragon Ball was already over. Turns out that Akira Toriyama had ended his original run of Dragon Ball before the show even ever premiered in the West in the first place. Shonen Jump's flagship series had come to an end, but thankfully for the magazine and for audiences worldwide, his work had inspired a whole new generation of mangaka, just as Astro Boy had set off a wave of new creators decades prior. In 1997, just 1 year after Dragon Ball ended publication, a new star rose to fill the pages of the most popular manga magazine. This was, of course, One Piece. Eiichiro Oda's pirate adventure was an instant success in all of Japan. Monkey D. Luffy resembled Goku with his goofy nature, massive appetite, and fighting skills. However, One Piece would have less focus on fighting and instead concentrate much more on character development and world building, eventually becoming one of the world's longest running series and outselling every comic but Superman, which had also had like a 60-year head start to begin with. But One Piece wasn't the only new hit to grace the pages of Shonen Jump, because yet another legend debuted around the same time by Masashi Kishimoto. His shonen starred a rambunctious knucklehead ninja named Naruto Uzumaki. Little fun fact, the One Piece character Sanji was originally gonna be named Naruto since his swirly eyebrow resembles a Naruto, a Japanese fish cake with a spiral pattern. Oda then changed the character's name to avoid confusion with Kishimoto's new comic as well. Wait a second, Uzumaki also means spiral, right? I mean, I know that from Junji Ito's horror series Uzumaki, which now no one can complain that I did not include in this very comprehensive manga history video. Wait a minute, did Kishimoto really name his main character Spiral? I feel like I'm spiraling here. Anyways, Naruto also became massive, but just could not quite beat out the Goliath that was One Piece. But there was one arena where Naruto just straight up outshone its rival, the West. Due to a variety of factors, Western audiences, especially in America, went absolutely crazy for Naruto, while One Piece just kind of floundered around. The main reason for this was One Piece's original English dub, which was produced by a company called 4Kids. Now, 4Kids Entertainment was a media company that licensed and localized various anime for broadcast in the States, having previously brought Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! To America as well. Now, for a kid-friendly series like Pokemon, this wasn't that much of a problem. However, despite One Piece's cartoony art style, there was plenty of content that 4Kids deemed inappropriate for children. And so Sanji's cigarettes became lollipops, and he inexplicably gained a Brooklyn accent. They removed all blood, all guns, all blades, they cut out entire arcs, and they included the infamous One Piece rap theme song, which still survives as a real meme of the internet to this day. Due to these changes, Naruto dominated the West, leading to kids everywhere donning shinobi headbands and cringily Naruto running around the playground. Meanwhile, it wasn't until 2007 that Funimation started the current dub of One Piece, which then led to many fans taking things into their own hands and creating fan subs. Anime being released in both Japanese and English at the same time is fairly common today, but in past decades it was practically unheard of. It could take literal months or sometimes even years to get a dub, so fan subs were a significant part of the fandom at that time. But One Piece and Naruto weren't the only super popular series in Shonen Jump during that time period in Japan though. Joining them a couple of years later in 2001 was Tite Kubo's Bleach, which followed the Soul Reaper Ichigo Kurosaki. Its darker, edgier subject matter and super sleek art style made it yet another really successful battle shonen manga. Today, collectively, One Piece, Naruto, and Bleach are known as the Big Three, something that Kendrick probably doesn't agree with, but that was because they dominated manga sales between 2004 to 2014. These three long-running series were absolute powerhouses, ruling the shonen landscape for a full decade in a way that has never been seen before and honestly hasn't been seen since either. They were so popular, in fact, that a ton of people were actually first introduced to some of their iconic fight scenes in the form of so-called AMVs, or anime music videos, where fans would basically post online videos of fight scenes set to the sound of nu metal music like In the End by Linkin Park, which might sound somewhat cringy now, but I guess you just had to be there, kids. Okay, I do admit it, it was pretty cringy back then as well. Now, despite the sales numbers of the Big Three though, that doesn't mean that those were the only series around during the mid-2000s. There are a ton of classics that also caught on both in Japan and abroad at that time as well. Full Metal Alchemist enjoyed a second wave of popularity with the re-release of Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, a second animated version that was a lot more faithful to the source material. That was because its original adaptation had caught up to the manga releases and did something very unprecedented. Instead of creating filler arcs or even slowing down its release schedule, it just made up its own whole new story. Now, both versions were popular, but Brotherhood remains widely regarded as one of the all-time greatest anime series ever and an ideal entry point for many new fans. Death Note's grim premise and psychological drama gained a lot of following within the teenage audience at the time as well. While a lot of the Western market was dominated by battle shonen, Death Note traded the super-powered combat for complex mind games. And lots of supernatural murder. Code Geass was yet another classic of this time period that included its own fair share of giant robot combat, but also had cerebral strategy and mind games kind of similar to Death Note as well. And then in the mid-2000s, American audiences would also finally receive a beloved shonen by Yoshihiro Togashi, Yu Yu Hakusho. At this point, Yu Yu Hakusho had long since already ended its own publication, but it wouldn't premiere on the US's Adult Swim programming block until 2001. And yet audiences didn't really seem to mind its distinctly 90s style animation. How could they complain though when they were getting the greatest tournament arc to ever appear in all of anime? And yet another Togashi series, Hunter x Hunter, had already received an original video animation in 1999, but it wouldn't be until 2011 that Madhouse's adaptation of the long-running series would actually begin as well. Fans may not have immediately known that this adventure was written by the same author as Yu Yu Hakusho, but Hunter x Hunter became an absolute classic in its own right, with heartwarming characters and one of anime's best power systems. To this day, to many fans, Hunter x Hunter is what exemplifies everything that is great about shonen. Sadly though, due to Togashi's ongoing health problems, Yu Yu Hakusho's ending was fairly rushed, and Hunter x Hunter has gained the nickname of hiatus, taking quite frequent extended breaks from its own publication. Despite having been around pretty much as long as One Piece, it only has a third as many chapters. Fans can really only hope that someday Hunter x Hunter will see its conclusion, and we do wish Togashi luck in his battle against chronic pain. Thankfully though, he is at least supported by his own spouse, Naoko Takeuchi, the author of Sailor Moon. They are truly manga's ultimate power couple. In 2005, the Western popularity of anime would then reach new heights with the premiere of Nickelodeon's Avatar: The Last Airbender. More than any other Western-made cartoon before it, Avatar took clear and direct inspiration from the manga art style. There actually were a few early precursors to this, dating all the way back to the 80s with American cartoons like Thundercats and the early 2000s Teen Titans, but The Last Airbender really became a cultural icon. No longer was anime just gaining traction in the West, now American animation studios were being inspired by and adopting these styles as their own. France even got in on the action with a unique show called Code Lyoko, which blended 2D and 3D style animation, despite being in the days where CGI, especially on television, was very much in its infancy. Also, they hadn't quite figured out how to draw normal-sized foreheads yet, it seems. Collaborations between Western and Eastern comics are surprisingly old, with a Japanese-produced Batman comic actually being written all the way back in the 60s, during the height of the Adam West live-action TV Batman's popularity. Now, in the mid-2000s, this run was then actually resurrected and reprinted as Batmanga. Nowadays, artists doing runs of DC or Marvel properties are pretty common, as are other anime versions of other massive Western franchises like Star Wars Visions, a series of shorts that all take place in the Star Wars universe. One Piece is obviously still going strong, but as Naruto and Bleach wrapped up, a new generation of shonen would step up to fill in the gap. Series like My Hero Academia and Demon Slayer became crazy popular. Meanwhile, Attack on Titan and One Punch Man also met another insane wave of success. Attack on Titan actually caught on in a huge way because audiences were apparently craving some more brutal violence. Many Western audiences had never seen such gruesome animation despite others coming before it. In a way, it was riding a similar cultural wave as HBO's Game of Thrones, with fans watching week by week, waiting to see which of their favorite characters would be killed off this time. Yet another massively popular genre within anime and manga are sports stories. In the mid-2000s and throughout the 2010s, sports had a resurgence with examples like Kuroko's Basket, Haikyuu, Yuri on Ice, and Blue Lock. However, they were far from the first to ever do it. The basketball manga Slam Dunk dominated Shonen Jump in the 90s alongside Dragon Ball. And before that, legendary boxing series like Ashita no Joe were influential since the 1960s. Hajime no Ippo is yet another boxing story that's been running since 1989 and is on the short list of series that are even longer than One Piece. And actually, while we're shouting out things that rival the length of One Piece, I've gotta mention Detective Conan, even though that's not a sports manga. I do guess the main character Conan does have a habit of knocking out criminals with a soccer ball, so I'll let him hang out with all of the other athletes here. One Piece actually passed Detective Conan's chapter count in 2024, but the long-running detective series had been in the lead for decades. And I know there's no way to mention every really influential manga in this video, but I wouldn't be able to live with myself if we left out my boy Conan here. It's clear that one of anime fans' favorite things about the medium is that it allows them to be transported to another world, and that may be exactly why in the mid-2010s the floodgates opened and outpoured a true tidal wave of isekai anime. Isekai, which literally means a different world, a genre where a normal person is, you guessed it, transported to a different world, often some sort of fantasy setting or one within cyberspace, has existed as a genre for a long time. Inuyasha and Digimon Adventure were both examples of this in the late 90s and early 2000s. However, in the era of streaming services, several series would capitalize on this newfound popularity, arguably starting in 2012 with Sword Art Online, which follows characters trapped inside a video game. There were some earlier examples of this, but this is one that became a cultural touchstone within the anime community, despite its deeply questionable second season. Questionable actually might be too light of a word here. I mean, if you know, you know. Following Sword Art Online were No Game No Life and Re:Zero, starting life in another world, and that time I got reincarnated as a slime. The isekai genre has somewhat lightened its oversaturation in recent years, but we're still getting plenty of them, such as 2022's The Eminence in Shadow, and even a show about someone being reincarnated as a vending machine. A ton of these series were originally based on light novels before getting their actual anime adaptations. But of course, it wasn't just new stuff that was truly crushing it in the mid-2010s. The legends weren't just gonna sit by and let the new kids on the block have all the fun themselves. In 2015, anime fans were shocked at the return of Dragon Ball in the form of Dragon Ball Super, which now featured Goku fighting the likes of gods and interdimensional beings in his fiercest battles yet. And then in 2016, 1 year later, the streaming service Crunchyroll would partner with Funimation, and its user base absolutely exploded in numbers. This service had actually existed all the way back to 2006, which actually blew my mind doing the research for this video, but in the mid-2010s, it became really well known as the go-to destination for streaming your favorite anime titles. There were already several series available on competing services such as Netflix and Hulu, but now anime had enough cultural capital in the West for a service that offered anime and anime only to be successful in its very own right. By partnering with Funimation, which had licensed dubs going all the way back to 1994, it gained the hard-hitting shows that it needed to push its subscriber base to well over 1 million customers. And so while previously Western fans had long and tedious waits before their favorites were localized, now many hit shows were actually simulcasted in Japan and around the world. Gone were the days where Western fans had to depend on fan translations and piracy because their favorite series were available just a click away at the same time that Japanese audiences got to see them as well. Then, in the latter half of the 2010s, newcomers took over as the most popular shows around. There have always been innovative creations that subvert the expected tropes of anime, like the classics from Gainax and Studio Trigger, but in today's current landscape, anime is evolving beyond these older expectations and genre tropes by itself. Now, it's series that are flipping those exact genres upside down that are the most popular of them all. Jujutsu Kaisen and Chainsaw Man are like deconstructions of your standard shonen that remix the character archetypes and story structures that most fans are now way too used to. And it's not just shonen either. Slice of life that focuses more on everyday relationships are also way more popular than ever before. My Dress Up Darling, Kaguya-sama Love is War, Komi Can Communicate, and a newly animated version of the 90s shoujo Fruits Basket are all performing incredibly well in Western markets as well. Meanwhile, Frieren, Beyond Journey's End, and Delicious in Dungeon, Dungeon Meshi, are combining the best strengths of both, giving us fantasy settings with plenty of action, but with a core of more tender, heartfelt relationships. Currently, in the mid-20s, manhwa and webtoons from South Korea are becoming increasingly popular as well. They do have a lot in common with general manga art styles, but are definitely putting their own mark on the medium as well. Webtoons in particular are meant to be read by scrolling on a phone or tablet, so they bring a very new approach to paneling. In addition, since they're frequently not intended to be printed, at least at first, they're often rendered in full color, which makes for a unique reading experience compared to the black and white manga. With series like Solo Leveling or Tower of God now getting major animated adaptations and blowing up in popularity, surely we're only seeing the beginnings of this new wave and era in animation. And so as things stand now, anime is more popular than ever before all across the globe. The 4 most successful comics publishers in the entire world are all manga publishers, beating out US publishers like Marvel and DC that have been dominating the market since the very beginning of comics themselves. In 2020, Demon Slayer Mugen Train became the highest grossing Japanese film ever. Helped, to be fair, also in part by global circumstances that brought most film production to a screeching halt at the time. Studio Ghibli's 2024 film The Boy and the Heron was an Oscar winner, Miyazaki's first Academy Award since Spirited Away. And the release of Netflix's One Piece live action led to One Piece becoming even more globally popular than at any time in its history, perfectly setting it up as it enters its final saga. And US shoppers will now notice entire shelves of volumes at big box stores like Walmart or Targets. In other words, today is probably the best time ever to be a manga fan. Especially because now we all get to watch videos about all of our favorite anime right here on YouTube. We try to get to the bottom of the wildest mysteries, the craziest theories, and even the deeper meaning and symbolism behind things like the hair colors in anime. Like, did you know that every hair color, whether it's red or blue or pink or whatever Yugi Moto's got going on, has a secret meaning behind it? And you can learn that secret meaning of every anime hair color in this video right here. Thank you so much for watching.